Hi, everybody. Welcome to NLL Lacrosse Talk. I'm Gary Groob. Today, I've got a really special guest with me. I've got the former goalie from the championship of the Colorado Mammoth years. I have Chris Levis on the show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. The greatest question we ask, the first question is always, how did you pick up a stick? What brought you into the game?
It was my dad. My dad played lacrosse and hockey, and he played it as an adult. He didn't get a chance to play it growing up, but he found the sports as an adult when he was living in the Windsor, Essex County area there. And so when we were younger, we had a very athletic neighborhood. A lot of kids played sports. We had a big park right next to our house, so we were always playing something, and hockey and lacrosse were the two things that my brother and I gravitated towards. So I owe all of it to my dad, really.
Really? What kept you in the game?
I think the competition, the guys, being in the dressing room, being part of the team, that was always, that was a lot of fun. And lacrosse, specifically in Windsor, was a lot of fun. I think because of the coaches that we had. We camped a lot. We go to tournaments and camp, and maybe that's an Ontario thing, but it just it made the lacrosse season a lot of fun. So yeah, naturally the relationships that I built in lacrosse were special, and to this day I still have buddies that I made through lacrosse, right? So
right,
it was just unique in that way, whereas hockey wasn't. Hockey was, you're staying in hotels, and it was just different. The camping element, I think, was a big thing.
Right. Who were the biggest influence, other than your dad, who were the biggest influence coming up? Because again, it's not a huge community in Windsor for lacrosse. There had to be a few guys that you just kind of gravitated to and to kind of get you the right way.
Yeah, when I was younger, I would say we had a lot of the Warlock guys around Windsor that were always kind of hanging around. Armand Gervais, my coach growing up, he was a good influence. But Reg Gordon, who played in Peterborough, played senior A in Peterborough back in the day. His son was Ian Gordon, who was a really, really good lacrosse player. Reg introduced us to sort of that next level of lacrosse, which was, the Brooklyn Redmen and all of them. So we would drive up to Brooklyn to watch games, and that was the first time I had seen Wayne Cawley, and so Wayne Cawley became, sort of an idol of mine growing up, right? I mean, obviously the success he had with the Redmen throughout the years was a factor in that, but he was a really a really strategic thinker. So when I talked to him about the position, he always came at it from, like a system, and that always resonated with me. So I'd say Wayne was probably my first, exposure to what I would call real lacrosse. We had the turbos across the river there in Detroit, but it was almost like those guys were untouchable. It's not like summer lacrosse where, you're meeting the guys and you're in the dressing room after games. The turbos were a little bit different. So.
Yeah, and coming out of the mill era too, it was everything was just so big with ESPN and everything like that. Because I remember jumping across over to Bandits games, and it was just incredible in the Memorial Odd, and just the whole ambiance of it, and it was just done to the nines. We're still trying to recapture that now, I think.
Yeah, I think the sport is going through a little bit of I don't want to say a rebranding, but I think it's almost trying to find its identity again, right? I think the field game down in the US has done a really good job of pulling in big names, and they've marketed it well. And I, for whatever reason, I think box is, I'm partial to box. I've always played box. I never played field, but box has always seemed to always lag behind,
Yeah.
and I think, like I said, in the field game, I think they've done a really good job of marketing it. Like, the game looks slick, and the way they package it looks really, really good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on that. It's funny because, I remember even talking with Jim Wasson and things like that, and they were talking about even in the 70s, all the things that we're striving for, we had. We
Yeah,
had the big arenas, we had the big crowds, we had the TV, and now
yeah,
we're trying to reinvent it again to get to where we used to be. And we just
yeah.
can't recapture lightning again.
Yeah, I had the years that I operated my sporting goods store. I had some really good guys around me. One of those guys was Dave Wilfong,
Mhm. Yeah,
and Dave played in that old league, and he would talk about that, and he would talk about playing in Long Island and how the crowds were and everything,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, those guys were the pioneers and sort of got everything going. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the game is now. It seems like Vancouver's doing a good job. Calgary seems to be doing a good job, and I don't want to pick teams out and this and that, but it seems like some of them are on the up and some of them are on the down, right? So I don't know if that's I don't know if that's sort of a wave that some teams would go through, but yeah,
I also think it has to do a little bit with where the markets where they're sitting. And Vancouver's always been a hotbed. They were needing it to go back to the mainland. I think up in Langley was great and all, but it was a really difficult travel, especially if you're on the island.
yeah,
That's a weekend going for
yeah,
that. But
yeah. That
demographics just changed too along the way.
Yeah, the LEC is a great venue, but it's not Rogers, right? So I think the more you put teams in those sorts of venues, the more it legitimizes the product. And if you have teams in that sort of venue straight across the country, well, it's taken a little bit more seriously, I think.
Right, right. Let's drill back a little bit more to where you coming up. Nobody dreams about standing in front of a 100-mile-an-hour shot right off the hop. How did goalie become where you fit in?
I think it was honestly, it was where I was most comfortable. I
Right.
remember starting out playing. I remember I started out playing in hockey, and I started playing out in lacrosse. That's where I began playing, and I don't know, I just felt lost. And we always had a set of goalie pads around the house, growing up when I was younger. So I always gravitated towards putting the pads on and letting my brother shoot on me or the kids in the neighborhood. Right, I always wanted to be in net. So I don't know. I think it was just a comfort thing, and the other thing is that when you're playing goal, the mindset is that it's sort of all or nothing, right? You're either making the save or you're getting beat by the shot. There's no in between, and I always like that sort of approach. If I made a save, then I could say, well, it was because X and Y that I made the save. And if I allowed a goal, I'd always try and break it down into what went wrong in the sequence that ended up allowing a goal, right?
Sure.
So I always like that sort of approach to the game.
Right. And it's funny because it's feast or famine. Either you look like the star or you look like the like the goat in it because you're the last thing everybody sees. But there's
For
so much
sure.
more. There's so much more to it. And being a goalie, being a quarterback of everything, really, because you're calling the switches, you're calling the slides and everything like that, trying to keep everybody moving. Did you find that to be natural, or did it develop into that kind of persona?
Yeah, I definitely developed it. When I was younger, it was definitely tougher. You learn to communicate, you learn to work with your defenders. I say all the time to young goalies, right? The ball beats you, it doesn't beat your defenders, right? So learning that at some point in your career, I think is really important because you need those guys. You need your offensive guys to relax and play well on the offensive end, and you need your defenders to want to go out and work hard, right? Not only for you, but for the team. But it's always good when they're working hard for you. In the back of their mind, they're thinking, hey, I want to do right by this guy, and this guy's working hard for us. And if you have that relationship, I think it's a win-win. So as I went on in my career, I definitely learned how to do that better. Yeah.
Right. Right. Now, talk to me a bit about your journey in here, because you're coming up, and again, you're coming out of Windsor, and now you're coming through Ontario to try and get elevated, so to speak,
Yeah.
and you get in with Six Nations. Talk about getting in with the Chiefs first off, because you were there with the '96 Man Cup run, which is amazing. Talk
Yeah.
about coming into that organization in the first right, and were you in right away, or were you kind of off to the side? How did the veterans kind of take to you coming in?
I think there was probably a little bit of a imposter syndrome on my part. You know, you're standing around guys that, you know, to this day, I think were the best lacrosse players that I ever faced or had shoot on me, right? I mean, the Chiefs team specifically, I mean, those guys, to make my point, I probably felt like an imposter. They were more than welcoming. And guys like Troy Cordingley and John Tavares and Darius Kilgore and Richie Kilgore and Jamie Batley, I mean, all of those guys have had successful coaching careers in the NLL, let alone, you know, playing careers. So all of them were really good at welcoming guys into the fold, and they certainly helped me. I mean, my confidence in my lacrosse IQ that year in '96 went through the roof, just for the simple fact that those guys would stick around 15, 20, 30 minutes after practice and shoot because they want to get better, but you know, they'll take shots. Like, they have no problems, and they have no issues giving feedback. So yeah, all those guys. I mean, I go through our power play, and I was thinking about this the other day. You know, our power play in Six Nations, we had 2 A1 power plays.
Mm-hmm.
And to sit back and watch those guys do what they did, I mean, the ball movement was incredible.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of in awe, and everything is moving so fast, you kind of get caught watching how good guys are. And so, yeah, it was just a tremendous experience. And yeah, those guys helped me out tremendously. Yeah.
Right. What made that team so special? With, you know, it's one thing to have a lot of talent, you know, because there's only one ball, but the chemistry has to be so special on that it all works. Because we've all seen teams that have been overly talented that don't work.
Yeah.
Made that such a great thing, that the chemistry was so wonderful that we're kind of watching it now with the Six Nations resurgence the last few years.
Yeah. That's a phenomenal team too. I think that there's going to be a level of talent that every guy brings to the table. And I think on his individual team, whether he's playing in the wintertime or he's playing in the summertime, that player is going to know, you know, I'm really comfortable, I'm really confident doing this one thing. And it also takes a different type of high level player to say, you know, I'm really, really good at this one thing, but on this team, in this scenario, I'm not that. I've got to do this. And that 96 Chiefs team's a perfect example of, you know, there was guys doing things on that. I mean, you've got Troy Cordingley and Jamie Batley on your right crease. I mean, 2 of the best hands I've ever played against. And both guys are like, you go, no, I'll go. And it's like, it's not a humility thing. It's confidence. Like, I know if I'm going to go, I'm going to score, but I know also if you go, you're going to score. And so there was guys doing different things on that team. They didn't have to be the superstars. They just were really good at recognizing what their role was and how they were best going to move the needle forward. And they did that. Right. Yeah.
Now, winning at such a young age, you know, there's guys go the whole career and never been close to winning. What does that do for the for the confidence, for one, but just as a life lesson? What does that do for you?
It teaches you that it's really tough to win championships. Really tough. If I go back to 96 and you ask me the question, what's things going to look like? I'd probably have rattled off, oh, I'm, you know, going to have 4 or 5 rings by the time this thing's all said and done. But
Right.
it's tough. And winning a Man Cup is something
Grueling.
very, very special.
Yeah, just grueling. 7 games, 10 days.
It's awful. Yeah, it's absolutely it's awful. But I mean, awful in a good way.
Yeah.
But it is really difficult. So, the stars have to sort of align that you're on the proper team and the proper organization that wants to win and is bringing in the proper guys. I was very, very fortunate in my career that I played with some incredible organizations with incredible coaches and incredible general managers and presidents and staff that were all really committed to winning. So we always had good competitive teams around. And that being said, it's still really, really tough to make it to the Man Cup and then to win a Man Cup. It's really tough. So, if you have an opportunity to be part of one of those organizations, then
I agree.
Cherish it. Yeah, cherish it.
Yeah, it's savor the moments, because who knows when that happens again. Now, the next year you wind up with the Six Nation Arrows, the junior A team, and playing with them, and played about 13 or 14 games with them, being able to put your footprint out so that the NLL would start looking. I guess it was still Mill transitioning into the MLL at that point.
98.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about, first off, the season with the Arrows, because again, another storied franchise.
Yeah, we originally, when I was coming out of Windsor, there was 3 of us that were coming out of Windsor, and I ended up getting drafted to Sarnia. But Sarnia at the time, I would have been 16. Sarnia had 2 senior goaltenders, so they were almost overagers, I guess you could call them, or they were aging out after the season. And so there wasn't a whole lot of space in Sarnia to play. And through Randy Reno and Darren Wilson, 2 guys that had won a Minto Cup with Six Nations in 92, there came an opportunity, because Six Nations had some turnover. There came an opportunity to go there in 93. Right. So my first year in Six Nations was in 93. And I was 16, and I moved to the reserve from Windsor, and worked in the community and lived in the community. And it was the best thing I ever did. It was such an incredible experience. And to this day, I was talking to friends this morning from back home, and the billets, the organization, everything was top notch. And it was just a phenomenal experience right from the get-go.
Right. We'll talk a little bit about the culture. It has to be a culture shock being a kid from Windsor who doesn't really know too much about this, to be right in the heart of the reservation, and everything that's going around every day, never known just at the rink.
Yeah. I was born and raised on the west end of Windsor, very urban, right? And just a different culture altogether. And moving to Six Nations, it's all farmland. So, you're listening to a lot more country music than I did.
Sure.
And although I have an appreciation now for country music and good country music, at the time I really didn't. So it was just a lot more laid back. The things that we did for fun, different. And the relationships, different, right? It was more, it was much more laid back. It was just such a great way of life, and a good experience right off the hop.
Right. Now, coming into the NLL, take us back to draft day. We're in 1997, and here you are. You get drafted by Buffalo in the 8th round. Talk to us about that, because the 8th round is not exactly known for putting out stars, but you found your way there. You found your way into the lineup. I got a few questions about that, but just draft day, and your name gets called. Talk to us about that.
To be honest with you, I can't even remember it. I think that, I mean, I'm dating myself, but the internet would have been around. So, you would have gotten some sort of I would have gotten a notification on the internet.
Yeah.
But I think there was more like, hey, we think we're going to draft you, we'll see how things go. There was sort of a talk like that with a few teams, and I
Right.
was, aging out anyway. So my headspace was, I'm going to play senior one way or another, and if I end up getting drafted, then great. And it just so happened that I ended up getting drafted late in the, late in the draft. And yeah. And so
Right.
I don't know. I didn't put much weight to it, I guess. I was still sort of in the Six Nations Arrows mindset. We had a really competitive playoff against Whitby, and we legitimately thought, we were going to win a Minto Cup.
Yeah.
So we were kind of getting out of that, and I was still living up in the area, so we were, probably just moping around about that whole thing when it happened, right? Yeah.
My favorite question to ask is your very first training camp. Was it what you expected?
It was intense. I think there was a little bit of a taste of the speed and the caliber just being with the Chiefs, and I thank Les Wakeling for that, right? For him bringing myself and a few other guys from the team into the fold in 96 and 97. So you kind of get a taste for it there. And I mean, you're getting a taste of the best of the best. I mean, John Tavares is shooting on you, and the rest of the guys that I had mentioned before. So you're getting a pretty good idea of, the speed of things. But training camp is, it's a little different. As soon as you throw in the physicality and the nervousness and the nerves and everything else of it, it's another level. And I think, thinking back in my career, all of the training camps were like that because they're important, right?
Yeah.
So you're going into camp and you want to show your best right off the hop. I don't think at any point in my career I was ever a guy that was a shoe-in. So I always felt I had to go into training camp and prove something, right? So you always had those nerves, and I would be more concerned if I didn't have those nerves going into any of the camps, right?
Right, sure. Now you got into a couple of games there. Do you remember what was your welcome to the NLL kind of moments? Like, I'm not in junior anymore.
Yeah. Buffalo against Rochester, and Ross Cowie got starred by a shot. He got hit between the eyes and wasn't able to continue. And it was a close game and a big rivalry, obviously, with Rochester.
Yeah.
And I got an opportunity to go into that game due to Ross taking a shot between the eyes.
Now, when you're in the game now, and of course you're focused on what's going on, the speed of it, the speed of the NLL, is it just a time to sit back and marvel, going, "Wow, this isn't anything I've ever seen before," and just kind of slow it down to your own recollection?
I think you want to do that as a player. I think you want to be able to slow things down, but I could tell you with absolute certainty that things were moving 100 times faster than I wanted them to move when I got called to go into that net. So the only thing you can do really is just kind of have a faith in your abilities and the simple things that you work on. And even thinking back to then, I mean, a lot of that wasn't even part of my game. It was more winging it because, we, as goalies, you really don't have, like, you have mentors, but you don't have like specific goalie coaches or, specific psychiatry coaches that are saying, you got to think like this, you got to move like this, you got to build this foundation. That came later on in my career, but at the beginning, none of that stuff was popular or around. It's not like now. I mean, 5-year-olds in hockey have, specific dedicated goalie coaches that are also feeding them the psychology of how to think and, all that sort of stuff. that wasn't around even in the pro levels back in 98. That was non-existent, right?
Right. I almost think that we miss that kind of era because you had to figure it out on yourself. You had to be good with your own self-confidence, so to speak. Whereas now everything is pigeonholed into a certain, you're told you're going to be this and we're going to give you all the information and you're this. You were able to organically grow into this and develop. And as we look at your career, you were able to pick it up in different areas and different ideas, and eventually make it to that guy, and then eventually be that guy to teach the next realm of guys in there. We don't have that anymore. Because you're saying we have coaches from the time of when you're old enough to breathe, telling you how to do it. You don't
Yeah.
have that kind of development. I think we're missing that still now.
Yeah. There's certainly something to be said about figuring things out on your own, right? That's the much longer, more painful way to do things. You know, a goalie coach will tell you, lean on my experience, and that's the best way to do things. But at the end of the day, everyone is so. I mean, if you look at the landscape of goaltenders today in the NLL, for instance, and there's such a diverse group of athletes, and everyone stops the ball their own way, right? So I mean, each one of those guys throughout their career would have picked up a little something of this or a little something of that and added it to their repertoire, and taken the next step and then the next step and the next step. And so I think that there's certainly something to be said about about working things out on your own. There's a lot of time to reflect. There's a lot of time to watch film, to figure things out. And I think that's one thing with today's goaltenders. There's no shortage of opportunities to have film on yourself. I mean, for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons. Like there's the right reasons to have film, which is, I want to take a constructive look at what I could be doing better. What went wrong, where things broke down, how I can build on that. There's that element of it. And then there's the other element of it, which was, well, my defenseman was completely out of place. So that goal's not my fault. Right. And so, there's lots of opportunities for the younger kids to have that growing up all the way up in the junior, and the pro is a totally different animal now. I remember playing in Vancouver, and they had just started playing this last year. I played lacrosse. They had just started implementing this new replay system that everyone got clips and everything else. And oh my God, it was ridiculous. It was insane. You could, by the time Sunday came along or Monday came along, all the goals for, goals against were all clipped, everything like that. So I wish I had that, 15 years ago.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Now you move out of Buffalo into the New York Saints, where you actually get a chance to kind of spread your wings. You get into 10 games over there, or 8 games over there, and you get a chance really to get a taste of things. What was the experience there with that team? Because you weren't there long, but you were there enough to kind of set your thing into cement there.
Yeah, New York it was a great opportunity. It was a great group of guys, obviously really field based. There was a lot of American players there, so I had not played in an environment like that up until that point. So playing in New York was a fantastic experience. You learn that the American players are great athletes, and the Canadian players now are good athletes because a lot of them are going down and playing in U.S. programs for school and whatnot. So they're getting a taste of, the training and the strength and the fitness element of things. But back then, that was just starting to emerge. I think a lot of guys, kept their fitness up by playing lacrosse, not necessarily, doing stuff extracurricular out of playing lacrosse. So the U.S. guys were phenomenal ball shooters on the run, which had to, I had to change how I played. You're in a bigger net and the angles are changing, and they did a fantastic job of, like I said, shooting as moving targets. Whereas coming up through junior and up to that point, it was very box focused. So guys had their feet set, and you're facing very accurate shooters, but they're stationary shooters. So it was a great experience. And playing with G, that was my first time playing with G Nash,
Right.
Who was probably my all-time. Well, I don't want to get anyone upset. I've had a lot of favorite goalie partners, but G ranks up there and one of the favorite guys I played with.
Sure. We're going to get to G in a second here because, you were back with the Bandits. You went to the Columbus Land Sharks. But really, here's where our story begins. You get in with Colorado, and it happens to be 2006, and this is the year that they win it. Let's, again, talk about the culture of the team and what made this team so special that this is where we're moving forward to.
We had such a great family of guys in 2006. I think we just, if I think back to that team, there's not a guy on that team that I wouldn't go to dinner with today, right? Like they were all great team. We're a good team. They're all great teammates. So I think more than anything else, we had a really solid group of guys there. From the top down, everyone was on the same page.
Right. Gary Gate. No, that's usually enough just to say that. But talk about having him on the team, as well as being a leader, a mentor. There are so many leaders in there, though, that just having that kind of lacrosse IQ, shall we say, in there. How did that kind of elevate everybody around?
Gary is scary smart when it comes to lacrosse. He just sees the game in a different way, I think, than a lot of people view it. Certainly myself. Talking about me and G, there was a point at the beginning of the season where Gary kind of pulled me aside and said, "Look, I do things a little differently. I look at the game in momentum. I'm probably paraphrasing this, but I look at the game more in momentum. So there may be times during the season where you get pulled or G gets pulled, and you're not going to know why, but I just need you to be ready, right?" And so G was the number one guy. But Gary would look at the game and say, we're a little flat, so I'm going to switch things up. And we could be up by 2 goals, and G's coming to the bench and his hands are kind of up like, what'd I do wrong? Yep. And the next thing we would go off for, 5-6 goals after the switch. Right. So he just had a really great approach to seeing momentum in the game and knowing when things aren't going right and just making that switch, and everyone would just, respond, right? So that, I think, is where Gary really excelled. And he could break the game down in a way where, if a team was playing a certain defense, or if a defenseman was playing a certain way, or if an offenseman was playing a certain way, Gary saw that and he could say, we need to make this adjustment mid-game. And again, guys would be like, well, this other thing has been working for me, or it's been working for us. Mm-hmm. And Gary would say, let's just make the shift. And as soon as we make the shift, boom, we get success from it. Right. So I think of any of the coaches that I've ever played for, he was absolutely the best at that one element.
Right. Yeah. Talk to me a bit. We've mentioned G a few times now. I got to know G. He came through Toronto near the end of his career around the 2010 year, and just briefly. And I got to meet him, got to know him. But him in his prime, talk to me about him and how he helped elevate your game.
G was, he was a phenom coming out of junior. So we had missed G was, when I was in junior, coming out of junior, the starting goaltender in Whitby was Mike Y.
Mhm.
So G had been backing him up, but G had been coming up through the system and with Gavin and the rest of them. So
Right.
G, G, I really admired because he had such a great stick and he was such a good outletting goaltender. And because he did that so well, he didn't wear a lot of equipment. So he had to track the ball really well. And that's probably one of the biggest things that's misunderstood with G or not appreciated is that he did such a phenomenal job of tracking the ball. And I think that's one thing that a lot of today's goaltenders they've lost because when you're wearing bigger gear or more gear, you get hit in the event that you didn't track the ball, you might take one off your shoulder. Whereas, you know, in G's case, especially when we were in New York, if you don't track that ball properly, that's a goal. So, you know, you've got to move on it. And I thought that he did such a phenomenal job of moving on the ball. Yeah, he did a really good job.
Right. You move on to the Edmonton Rush,
Yeah.
and you sign as a free agent there. Talk to me about there because they had their years of growing pain, and then all of a sudden they caught fire around 2015 and they move. But
Yeah.
when you were in there was when they were just trying to move forward and they were starting to do the pieces and get everything going. Talk to me about the culture there after coming out of the championship years in Colorado.
I think we had a really good group of guys there. We had a lot of young guys there, so I think there was a lot of guys that were learning. They were learning what it took to be good players, myself included. Being good teammates. We all got along. The team culture was really good in Edmonton, but winning teams have something special. It was like I was talking about with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
There's there's an element of I know I could go out and be 100-point guy, but I don't need to be 100-point guy here. I'm gonna set hard picks and make sure that I'm picking up every loose ball opportunity that I have, right? Like that sort of mindset. So I think as you go on in your career, you learn because you see that the clock is ticking, and if you want to win a championship, well then your motivations have to change. So I think a lot of guys towards the tail end of their career, they start to change because they want to win. So they start adapting different things. But when you're young in your career and you see, oh, I'm going to be playing for 12, 15 years, that 100-point season is what you're chasing, right? So I think we were trying to find our identity as a team. And like I said, I've literally never played on a team where I've been like, oh, that, this guy or that guy. I love all the teams I've been a part of.
Right.
But that specific team, we were young and learning, right? Still. Yeah.
Sure. You wind up in Calgary, and you actually have quite a bit of success with the Roughnecks, so much so that you're in the next couple of All-Star games, as whether you're backups or whatever, but you're in the All-Star games. It brings me to a question to you. Are we missing the boat in the NLL now that we have TV with ESPN and TSN of having an All-Star game again? Are we missing out on this?
I think some sort of all-star something is important. I think showcasing the skills is important. I think all of that stuff is great. It's a lot of fun. Guys get together. As far as the game is concerned, the game's a little different. No one's hitting each other, and it's fun and relaxed. So I don't know how much the fans enjoy that. I've never spectated an all-star game, but as far as the skills competition and everything else like that's concerned, I think that stuff's all cool, and that brings butts to the seats. I think fans are certainly interested in that sort of stuff. I mean, sure. I mean, who wouldn't enjoy an all-star game, right? I mean, I think I think they're fun.
I wish Frank was here today because he had an idea, and it had to do with like the old NHL idea, and it was the championship team from last year, excuse me, hosts the game, and it's them against the NLL All Stars. Puts a little more skin in the game. it gives the team 6 months to a year to market it, so you get butts in the seats. But there's more than just a game of flag football. There's
Yeah.
actually, the All-Stars don't want to lose to the Rock, say, for this year, and
Yeah.
the Rock don't want to lose to the All-Stars. So there's a little more for the fans to get involved in and all that. And it could be every year and wherever, because next year who knows who wins, and then market it that way. And that way, there's a little bit more oomph in it. And in halftime, of course, you have the skills competitions and, make it something for everybody. But really, it'll be a spectacle for television. And a bar owner can put it on their TV and not worry about it. And I've tried this before. I've tried putting games on Chromecasted into local pubs, and you see that the conversations slowly turn there and stay there
Yeah.
because it's the most addictive game in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's got a bit of everything that has everybody enhanced in it and entranced in it. So
Yeah.
I think that would be a real win.
Yeah, I think, well, from the All-Star games perspective, yes. I think, I think that, like I said, I think the All-Star games are fun. I don't think you have an All-Star game environment when you're putting last year's champs against the league All-Stars, though. I think there's going to be a lot more at stake in that game. And I think that, then at that point, you got to decide, is this going to be a night off for the guys, and we're just going to run the floor, or is this going to be another competitive game this week? So, yeah.
Right. It's funny because when I talk to players about it, they're all, yeah. I talk to owners and management about it. It's like, no, God, no. Not a chance for them to get injured. That's our playoff run we're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. You have assets running around the floor. So I don't think guys are, I mean, I can think back, usually the All-Star games tailed an actual season game. So you were playing almost like a double header. You were playing a season game one night, and then you're traveling to the All-Star game the next day. So that sort of laxed environment was welcome for me anyways, because, you just got done playing a game. So, yeah.
Right. Well, I just figure with the amount of bye weeks that they have in the NLL now, that they could actually make one general bye week, and that would be All-Star weekend and whatever, and a meet and greet with fans and all kinds of different things to kind of put everybody closer to the game, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what would probably be a good idea is very much like what the Field League is doing, and maybe go to a venue that you're, kind of scoping for the future, right? Like maybe go down to Charlotte and have a game in Charlotte, or have a game in Chicago, or, one of those sort of places, something maybe Midwest that's easy for everyone to get to, but a new market that isn't necessarily, isn't already, an NLL team.
Right. I've always wondered why, the NLL are kind of trying to reinvent the wheel, and you put a team in Fort Worth, and you put a team in other places where you have to explain the game, where we have places like you've mentioned, like Chicago, Detroit, where people already know the game. It's already there. It's already been there. And just to get the right ownership group and the right sized arena to get it going, I think that it would be a plus right away. Boston comes to mind also, losing a team because of a bad arena deal. They had attendance. They just had a bad deal. There's no way that that ownership group could make money. Minnesota comes to mind again, because, again, they were getting 8,000 or 9,000 people. And, again, between the ownership and arena and things like that, and all of a sudden they're on the move. But there are places where you don't have to reinvent or rediscover and teach the game, that you could just go in and play, and people understand it already.
Yeah. I don't think people appreciate enough how Colorado was this sort of anomaly, right? Like the town just fully embraced the team. The crowds were crazy, and the fan support was unlike anywhere I've ever played. It was just such an incredible city to play in. But it's like that for all its sports. I mean, if you're an Avs fan, you're a lunatic. If you're, a Broncos fan, you're a lunatic. It just, whatever is in that town, they're just rabid sports fans. And I think chasing that model is tough, because it's like you say, you go down to an area like Anaheim or San Jose, and it's a great hockey town. They've embraced hockey,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to embrace another sport. In lacrosse, in Canada, we see the similarities, or we see the synergy between the two, because lacrosse is played in the summertime in arenas that are, not full of ice, which was what we did there in the wintertime.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? You're going to the same place. You're just playing a different sport in the same place.
Yeah.
And the synergy between the two sports, there's contact in both. So if you played hockey, chances are you're going to enjoy playing lacrosse.
Right.
But in the US, it's not like that. They don't see hockey and lacrosse as being, tied at the hip like we do in Canada.
Right.
So it's a little bit different. And I think the idea of having NHL teams involved in ownership and having a stake in the team makes sense, because you're sort of piggybacking off of the existing marketing, the existing executive, the existing infrastructure, and you're just filling the venue for one more time during the week, and you're marketing to your hockey people. So I think that has always made sense. But yeah, to just go out, like you're saying, into an area and hoping to have something like Colorado was, when they moved there, and in the mid 2000s, it's just not realistic. It's never happened before. So
right, there's a few places it's worked, because moving Edmonton and Saskatchewan, and a lot of it had to do.
Yeah.
Same thing with moving Rochester into Halifax. A lot of it had to do with they had boots on the ground beforehand, setting programs to the youth. And that, in my eyes, is the key, is the youth, because that's your base. Even if they don't want to become professionals down the road, that's your fan base. And if you can get them young, market to the kids, because they're going to bring mom, dad, sister, brother, uncle, aunt, grandfather, grandmother, everybody in there. If you market to an adult as the party like Mill did years ago, you sell one ticket. If you market to the kids, one, you get a fan for life, but two, you get more than one ticket sold, and you get a base built for life.
Yeah. Saskatchewan is a great story, because I remember going there and playing with Vancouver in 2016, and the fans were like just very passionate to say the least. But it's it's a fairly blue collar town. It's a fairly blue collar area. They like their football. They don't have much else going on other than, hockey and football and everything else. And you throw this sport of lacrosse into the area, and then you have a good team. Like, they also had a lot of success on the floor at that time. They were winning championships. So everyone's got something to get behind, and it's a recipe for success. If you look back, like, I agree with the kids wholeheartedly, but if you look back to Colorado, a lot of those fans, I mean, it was an event for them. They were getting dressed up, and they were going to have some beers and to hang out and to do all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that's the winning formula for every team, but it worked there, and it deviated from, we have this lacrosse base. The lacrosse base came
too there, right?
Yeah. The lacrosse base came after, like when the Mammoth landed, lacrosse blew up in the area.
Yeah.
It became very, very popular. So I think, having a good quality product to offer your fan base is very important. Vancouver's a good example. I mean, this is the Lower Mainland is a lacrosse hotbed, but it helps when they're successful. It's easy to put butts in the seats when they're winning, right?
Sure. I look at San Diego being that as well, because there's so many youth programs in there with a lot of players and former players still involved in it, and they had one on a boat. They had one, they have their practice field in an outdoor facility, which is just gorgeous. One of my favorite places to visit. And just the whole, the fan base isn't huge, but they're learning and they're knowledgeable and they want to be part of, and that's starting to spread. So you have that, once you have that burning sensation in there, then you have something to build in there. And I think that San Diego's been able to catch that as well.
For sure. Yeah. I never got an opportunity to play down there. I've only seen the videos, but it looks beautiful. And if you've got a good growing base of lacrosse in the area and boots on the ground, as we were saying, right, kind of helping prop up those organizations, then yeah, it's going to lead to a successful growth of the fan base.
Right. Now let's pivot. We've talked about the career. 2016 was your last year with Vancouver, more as a mentor than as a
For
day-to-day
sure.
player. But
Yeah.
that kind of leads us into the next portion of it, and the next portion of life here, and that's coaching. When
Yep.
did it kind of dawn on you that this is where I want to go with this? I want to be that guy that I've had some of these great coaches that I can give back.
I think probably probably the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
I started helping out and doing some coaching around, like just goalie specific coaching, and helping kids out. And it was nice to be around the dressing room in a different capacity where,
Right.
you're like, playing comes when you're playing. It becomes a routine. It becomes really comfortable. I can say now, looking back, coaching is a lot more difficult for me
Right.
than playing was. Playing was, I had my routine. I showed up to the arena. I did my thing. Coaching is something totally different because you want to see the kids and the team get better. So you're putting time in away from the rink, not so much, the physical side of it, the lifting, the, staying in shape, but more the film and the scouting and trying to figure out a system that works. And your mind is just, it's like you're always trying to figure out a chess game, whereas playing, you're just showing up and you're doing what you train for, right? You're just going through the motions more or less. So
Right.
yeah, coaching was the next evolution that just allowed me to see the game in a different way. And it allowed me to see that, kids could get the same satisfaction when they were successful. They could get the same satisfaction out of the game that I was fortunate enough to have growing up.
Right. It takes a couple of really big skills, though. One is communication, obviously, because if you can't communicate, you can't get your message across. But you
Yeah.
have to be able to let it develop, because you can't go out there and make the save. You can't go out there and make the pass or make the
Yeah.
shot. You actually
Yep.
have to let them do it and sit there and kind of hope against hope that they're catching on and doing it correctly, and finding ways around it, kind of like you did back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Teams are funny things. And each team has a, a, a full offering of personalities, right? There's players that are there for all different sorts of reasons. And you have to find the best way to communicate to each player and get the most out of each player. At the end of the season, I would always tell my guys, I want to be successful. You always want to win, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to look back on the season as a player and say, what did I learn this year? How was I able to grow this year? What do I need to work on? And that's what I always tried to focus on as success, as sort of an indicator of success for the season was, if you could start the year out and say, I was this type of player, but at the end of the year, I've grown in these areas and now I know I need to fix this, then that was always a win. Whether, I was never fortunate enough to win championships as a coach, but all the same, you want your players developing and growing and having that at the end of the season.
Sure. I think that there's maybe a bit too much emphasis on the championship thing, and I think you have it right. Is if we can get them to develop, really, that is a championship in its own right, because leadership, we talk about it being something that's developed, but can it be taught?
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, leaders. I don't think leaders are born. I think leaders are made, right?
Yep.
And I think that depending on the adversity that you go through or you've gone through in your life, that's what dictates your level of empathy and your communication style and your ability. I think all that stuff is learned through the years. And I think a lot in today coaching minor sports, there is a real fixation on winning. Like I want my child to be part of a winning environment, and that's what's most important. We have to win, and if we're not winning here, then I'm going to pull them and put them in this winning organization. And I think that's tough because, you know, at some point in your life, you're going to lose. You're going to hit a losing streak. And I think when you do, what you do after that is what you're going to use in life. Sports are going to fade out. It's inevitable. We all have to reckon with that, you know, sports come to an end and then life carries on after sports. So what did sports teach you that allowed you to become a better person, or maybe a leader in your job, or maybe a leader in your community? Like, what did you get from playing this one sport that allowed that? And that was always sort of my take on it, was you don't ever want to I didn't want to leave the sport of lacrosse and have nothing to show for it. Right. And I think the sport of lacrosse it owes me nothing. It's been a phenomenal experience, and
Sure.
if anything, it's taught me how to be a good manager in business, or a good family man, or that sort of thing. Right. That's all lessons that I've taken from the sport.
Right. The one thing I found with the lacrosse community, though, it doesn't matter. Like, we can hate each other for 60 minutes being on opposite sides, but whenever there's a real problem, that community comes together from all angles and all different parts of the world.
100%. Yeah,
and we all come
100%.
together. I've never seen another sport ever come like the lacrosse community. Second to none in my eyes.
Yeah, 100%. It's a phenomenal community, and I'd have to agree. The friendships that you make, and I say this all the time to the young kids, again, the sport's going to end. But at the end of the day, you're going to be sitting on maybe a golf course or a hockey dressing room, drinking beers with the same guys that you played lacrosse with when you were 6, 7 years old. And that's the most important thing.
Right.
And you can't drive that home enough when kids are 9, 10, 11 years old, because, they have their whole lives ahead of them. Right. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, those situations are absolutely going to happen in your life. Right. And you're going to lean back on that experience and that community and those friends. You're going to lean back on that to help you in life later on down the road.
For sure. Yeah. Now, just a few more things before we wrap up, because it's been like an hour has gone by like this.
Oh, Jesus.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
Isn't that wild?
That's crazy.
Just sit and chat, right?
I don't talk to anyone for an hour.
I feel very, very blessed. Thank you.
Yeah, well, don't, but it's been great.
I want to look forward to the Olympics, and of course we have sixes on it. First of all, your view on sixes. As a goalie, I've never heard a really great thing coming to that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you the typical goalie response. It's definitely not a game that favors us.
Yeah,
but it's a great way to introduce the sport to the world on that stage.
Yeah,
and it's a great way to say, these other competing countries are able to get their foot in the door. It would be very, very difficult to have the world compete on the Olympic stage in a full field lacrosse format. Right. It would be very difficult. The depth, I would think, of a lot of countries falls off a cliff, after you're starting, 9, right? It probably gets pretty slim picking. So to do it this way, I think, the countries and the teams that are favored for a reason. So, I don't take anything away from them, but I think the format makes sense, and it's exciting to see the sport finally at that respect, that level of respect, and being played on that level, I think is right. Great.
Well, I had Bob DeMarco on from World Lacrosse, and he explained actually why we went into sixes and not into a field or a box idea. And it came down to actually the Olympic Committee, and there can only be 10,000 athletes and staff in the Olympics, according to the IOC. And if we wanted lacrosse in there, there's no way that we can bring a field team where we have 24 guys and coaches and trainers and everything. We'd have 2 teams.
Yeah.
But for men and women
Yeah.
to do it sixes wise, where you're bringing 12, 13, 15 people with coaches, you're
Right.
able to put 6 or 7 teams in both men and women and have something competitive that the world can see. And we can't do box because there's not arenas everywhere around the world. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it is tough to find a box lacrosse arena in Africa. So,
It
having a field
100%.
little bit easier to do it and do it with a smaller one. I had talked with Bob Tearing, who actually was part of the Super Game back in the '80s, and he's a NCAA coach for many years. And should we do the nets smaller, make 4x4 nets? And he brought up something I never would have thought of, and I guess you would appreciate this. Is we were probably with the amount of talent in in the um, the Olympics that it would be we kill a goalie
Yeah.
because they could hit the diamond of the mesh. They're
Yeah.
so good,
Yeah.
but to make it at least 6x6, they're aiming somewhere else, not at the goalie and trying to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think box across goalies that's a very specialized position. And I think you have to grow up in that environment, playing box across in that environment in order to get world class. So I don't think every country lends that opportunity to a box across type goaltender. So that removes that position from the grand scheme of things. Otherwise, you're going to dress a goalie up in a bunch of big gear and throw him in the net and hope for the best, right? Like that's the other end of it, which I wouldn't want to see on an Olympic stage.
Yeah.
There's enough of that to be battled in the summer times. But the way they did it, I think, is good because it does highlight the goaltender as another athlete on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, it's just it's a scenario of the game where you're going to get more shots, you're going to get more close-in opportunities, and the scoring going to be, different than it would in a full field match, which is something that I'm sure all those goaltenders that are going to be playing for those teams have come to terms with. So.
Right. And we've had enough tournaments there to kind of, finagle the rules a bit and move this. And I'm sure being it in Los Angeles for the Olympics, by the time Hollywood gets there won't be a bad angle to view it because, again, first
100%.
impressions are lasting impressions. My biggest worry is if we don't have an exit strategy out of it, it'd be, well, that was wonderful. And then we go back to status quo and we don't get anything out of it. If we actually have an exit strategy, a marketing strategy, both for field and box, then we elevate. And that could be with another 300 countries taking a look at it. That could be where we get out of floor 3, 4 and get up to the penthouse and really get a chance to make lacrosse that number 4 sport that we keep trying to market and promote.
Yeah. I think the opportunity for field, like we started the conversation off, is, they're well positioned to capitalize on this for sure. The game looks athletic, it's a clean looking offering and it's getting cleaner every year, right? And people are understanding it better. And so the jump to box is something different. It's almost like the leap from football to arena football. It's the same thing, but it's not really the same thing. And I hate to use that analogy, but the powers that be that market box across have to find a way to take box across more towards hockey as opposed the arena football area. And that's what I worry about. I worry about, exactly like you say, they come out of the Olympics, they've got all this, all this momentum. The field game takes advantage of it. And the box across game stays what it's always been, right? Highly coveted in Canada. I mean, you go to any arena in the summertime, I'm sure the Ontario swing is the same right now. Everyone's in playoff mode. So the arenas are all, packed with people, hot as hell, and everyone loves that. That's the environment to be in. Yep. But they don't understand that down in the US. They don't understand why that's so special and so important. They don't understand, they don't understand a junior A game in the middle of summer
Mhm.
playoffs in Ontario or BC. They just
Right.
don't get that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Finally, when people hear your name 20, 30 years from now, what do you hope that they're thinking when they hear it?
Holy
Your
man,
legacy.
my legacy. Um, yeah, I've never really thought of that. I guess I just want to be remembered as a guy that was a good team guy,
Yeah.
right? I always enjoyed, I always enjoyed being around the team and the guys and competing. And so I think of anything, that's probably what was the most important thing to me was just being regarded as a guy that worked hard for his teammates and appreciated his teammates.
Right.
Yeah, no,
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
yeah, thank you.
I really love digging into all the things that people don't see when they're watching a player on the floor. All the
Yeah,
things that went into it, all the different things, both psychological and physical, and the development, and really the whole circle of everything and giving back. And I really appreciate you taking the time and being so eloquent about being able to describe it.
yeah, I appreciate you having me. This is a lot of fun.
All right. Well, that's the NLL Lacrosse Talk for this week, seen every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. We look forward to having you back again next week. And until then, for Chris Levis and for Gary Groob, remember, keep your sticks high, keep your spirits higher until we meet each other next week. Have a great week, everybody.